These stories were sent to me by real people. Not writers, not actors, not people looking for attention. Regular people, a nurse, a college student, a retired truck driver, a mother of 3 who experienced something they cannot explain, something they have never told their families, something that still wakes them up at 3 a.m. with their hearts hammering against their ribs and their eyes scanning the dark corners of the room. I get thousands of submissions every year. Most of them I can debunk. A rattling pipe, sleep paralysis, a trick of light through curtains. But some of them I read and I have to put my phone down and sit very still for a moment. Because the details are too specific to be invented. Because 3 different people from 3 different states describe the same thing, the same smell, the same sound, the same wrongness, without knowing each other existed. Tonight I've collected 10 of those stories, the ones I couldn't explain away, the ones that stayed with me. I've changed the names to protect the people who sent them. Most of them asked me to. A few said they didn't care, that whatever they encountered already knows who they are. Turn off the lights if you want, or don't. Honestly, based on some of what you're about to hear, it might not make a difference either way. My name is not important. What matters is that everything you are about to hear was sent to me by someone who swears on their life that it is true. Open Book Chapter 1, The Woman in the Polaroid. Danielle was 26 when she inherited her grandmother's house. It wasn't the kind of inheritance anyone dreams about. No fortune, no sprawling estate, just a narrow 2-story colonial on Whitaker Street in Savannah, Georgia, with peeling green shutters and a wraparound porch that sagged on the eastern side where the wood had rotted through. The house smelled like her grandmother, lavender sachets and menthol rub, and something else beneath those smells, something older, like soil after rain. And for the first few weeks, that smell alone was enough to make Danielle cry every time she walked through the front door. Her grandmother, Mabel, had lived in that house for 51 years. She'd raised 4 children there, buried a husband there, and in her final decade, lived there completely alone after her youngest daughter moved to Phoenix and the others found reasons to stay away. It wasn't that they didn't love her, it was the house. The family had always had a complicated relationship with that house. Nobody said why. Danielle had asked once when she was 13. Her mother had gone quiet and changed the subject, and something in that silence, sharp and deliberate as a closed door, told Danielle not to ask again. She moved in on a Thursday in October. Her boyfriend Marcus helped her carry boxes. He made jokes about the peeling wallpaper and the ancient clawfoot tub and the way certain floorboards sang under their feet like they were trying to say something. Marcus was the kind of person who laughed at things that made him uncomfortable. Danielle had always found it endearing. That October, for the first time, she found it irritating. She found the shoebox on her 3rd day. It was in the back of her grandmother's bedroom closet, behind a row of dresses that still held Mabel's shape, fabric so stiff with age it remembered the body that had worn it. The shoebox was white once, now yellowed, with MEMORIES written on the side in her grandmother's careful cursive. Inside, photographs, dozens of them. Polaroids mostly from the 1970s and 80s, family portraits, holiday dinners, a birthday party where someone had baked a lopsided cake. Danielle sat on the bedroom floor for an hour going through them, crying a little, smiling a lot. Then she found the one at the bottom. It was a Polaroid like the others. The image showed the living room of the house, this house, recognizable by the bay window and the particular pattern of the wallpaper behind the couch. Her grandmother was in the photo, seated in the armchair she'd owned forever, the one Danielle had moved to the corner by the fireplace. Mabel looked young in the photo, maybe 40. She was smiling at the camera, and someone had written on the white border beneath the image, Mabel, 1979. Danielle almost put it aside. Then she looked at the couch behind her grandmother. There was a woman sitting on it. She was turned slightly away from the camera, head angled toward the window so her face wasn't visible, just the profile of a jaw. A pale cheek, dark hair pinned up at the back of her neck in a style that felt more 1940s than 1979. She wore a dark dress. Her hands were folded in her lap. She sat very straight, very still. The thing that made Danielle's skin tighten was not the woman herself, but the way her grandmother was posed. Mabel was smiling at the camera, yes, but she was leaning forward in her chair, away from the couch, away from the woman. In the language of bodies, it was unmistakable. Whoever was taking that photograph, Mabel was leaning as far as she could from whoever was sitting behind her, while still managing to smile. Danielle turned the photo over, nothing on the back. She went through every other photograph in the box looking for the woman. She wasn't in any of them. She texted the photo to her mother that night and asked who the woman on the couch was. Her mother's response took 4 hours. It was 3 words, "Don't keep that." Danielle called her. Her mother didn't pick up. She texted again, "Mom, who is she?" Her mother's response, "Nobody that should be in the house." She called her Aunt Patricia in Dallas, the second oldest of Mabel's 4 children, the one who still sometimes talked about the old days. Aunt Patricia picked up on the second ring, and when Danielle described the photo, the woman on the couch, the dark dress, the pinned-up hair, Patricia went quiet for a long moment and then said, very carefully, "Danielle, I need you to take that photograph outside and burn it." Danielle said, "Aunt Patricia, that's..." "I know how it sounds. Burn it. Don't keep it in the house overnight." She didn't burn it. She was a rational person, 26 years old, with a graduate degree in urban planning. She put the photograph back in the shoebox and put the shoebox on the closet shelf and went to bed. She woke up at 3:17 a.m. Not gradually, not the slow surfacing of normal sleep, but all at once, completely alert, heart hammering, with the immediate and absolute certainty that something in the room had changed. She lay perfectly still the way you do when the animal part of your brain is running the show, eyes open in the dark, listening. The room smelled different. Not lavender and menthol, something else, something that took her a long, awful moment to identify. Rot, like something left too long in standing water, like the bottom of a vase of old flowers. It was coming from the closet. The closet door was open. She was certain she'd closed it. She was specific and deliberate about closed doors, a habit from childhood she'd never grown out of. The closet door was open and the smell was coming from it, and from inside the darkness of the closet she could hear, very faintly, a sound. A rustling, like fingers moving through paper, like someone going through a shoebox. Danielle turned on every light in the house that night. She found the shoebox on the closet floor. She had left it on the shelf. The lid was off. The photographs were spread across the floor of the closet, fanned out like a deck of cards, every single one face down. Except the one at the bottom of the pile, the Polaroid, Mabel in the armchair, 1979. That one was face up, propped against the back wall of the closet. And the woman on the couch was now facing the camera. Danielle drove to her friend's apartment at 4 a.m. with the shoebox under her arm. She burned the photograph in a metal mixing bowl on her friend's balcony. She watched it curl and blacken. She went back to the house the next morning because she had nowhere else to go, and because she was still, even now, trying to be rational about this. The smell was gone. The closet was normal. The other photographs were back in the box, the lid closed, the box on the shelf where she'd originally placed it. She lived in the house for another 7 months. In that time, 3 more things happened that she described to me, and which I will share with you exactly as she shared them with me. First, in January, she found handprints on the inside of the upstairs bathroom window. Small handprints, the size of a child's hands. The bathroom was on the 2nd floor. Second, in March, Marcus stayed the night for the last time. He woke her up at 2 a.m., pale and shaking, and told her there had been a woman standing at the foot of the bed watching her sleep. Dark dress, hair pinned up. He said the woman had looked at him when he woke up, looked directly at him, and smiled. He moved out of his apartment the next week. Not the house, his own apartment. He never explained why. They broke up shortly after. Third, on the night Danielle finally moved out in May, boxes loaded in the moving truck, house locked up, key left with the estate agent. She sat in her car in the driveway for a moment, just breathing, feeling the strange grief of leaving the last place that smelled like her grandmother. She looked up at the house. In the bay window, the same bay window you could see in the 1979 Polaroid, a woman was standing, watching her go. Dark dress, hair pinned up, hands folded. Danielle drove away without looking back. I contacted the estate agent who sold the house 6 months later. I asked if the new owners had reported anything unusual. The agent paused for a moment and then said, very professionally, that she wasn't able to share information about her clients. Then she added, unprompted, that the house had been relisted. She didn't say why. Open book chapter 2, night shift. Tom worked the overnight shift at a grain elevator for 11 years. If you've never been inside a grain elevator at 2 a.m. in rural Manitoba, let me describe it for you. It is a cathedral of industrial noise, the groan of metal in cold air, the distant rumble of the auger, the settling sounds of massive structures holding massive weight. Outside, nothing. For miles in every direction, nothing but flat land and sky, and the kind of dark that city people never experience. The kind of dark that has weight and texture, that presses against the windows and makes you feel like the building is the last lit room on the planet. Tom was used to all of it. He'd been doing it since he was 22. He knew every sound the building made, every creak and groan and rattle. He knew the difference between the south wall expanding in the cold and the north wall settling after a delivery. He knew the sound of mice in the walls versus rats. He knew the building like he knew his own voice. Which is why, in the fall of his 12th year, he immediately noticed the new sound. It was a Thursday night in late November around 1 a.m. Tom was doing his rounds, checking gauges, logging temperatures, the routine work that filled the long, quiet hours. He was on the second level, the catwalks above the main floor, when he heard it. Footsteps below him, on the main floor. Not machine noise, not settling metal. Footsteps, the specific weight and rhythm of a person walking, heel to toe, deliberately slow, crossing the concrete floor toward the far end of the building. Tom leaned over the catwalk railing and looked down. The main floor was empty, lit by the overhead fluorescents, every corner visible. Nobody there. He stood very still and listened. The footsteps had stopped. He went back to his rounds, told himself it was nothing. Exhaustion, maybe. The kind of auditory tricks that come with years of solitary night shifts. He logged the temperatures, checked the moisture readings, drank his coffee. By 2 a.m. he had convinced himself it hadn't happened. Then at 2:14 a.m. they started again. This time he was in the main office, seated at the desk. The footsteps were outside the office door in the corridor that ran along the east wall, slow, deliberate, moving toward the office. Tom sat very still and watched the door. The footsteps stopped just outside it. He waited 30 seconds, a minute, nothing. He opened the door. The corridor was empty, but the air in the corridor was wrong, noticeably colder than the rest of the building, and carrying a smell that Tom struggled to describe in his submission to me. He wrote, like pennies, like old copper, like the smell of blood except not quite. He checked the whole building that night. Every room, every catwalk, every storage area. Nothing. Nobody. Every exterior door locked from the inside, every window sealed against the November cold. He didn't tell anyone. He wrote it off. A week later, his coworker Ray mentioned it first. Ray worked the overlap shift, arriving at 5 a.m. to relieve Tom, staying until noon. He was a quiet, practical man, not given to imagination. He had worked at the elevator for 19 years. He stopped Tom at the shift change and said, without preamble, "You hearing the walking?" Tom said yes. Ray said, "It's been going on for about a month, always between 1 and 3 a.m., always on the east side." Tom asked if Ray had reported it. Ray looked at him with an expression that Tom described as asterisk, the look of someone who has already decided not to worry about something he can't fix. He said, "What would I report? That someone's walking around. It's nothing. It's always been nothing." Tom asked, "Always?" Ray paused. Then he said, "The east side of the building used to be something else before the elevator expanded in 1987, a grain storage facility. Before that, 1960s, it was part of a loading dock complex." He stopped. Tom said, "And?" Ray picked up his coffee thermos. He said, "A man named Willard Creech died there in 1971. Auger accident. They found most of him." Tom says that in the months after that conversation, he did his research. Willard Creech was real. He was 44 years old, a father of 2, and he died on a Tuesday morning in September 1971 during a routine maintenance check when the auger activated unexpectedly. The coroner's report, which Tom accessed through a county records request, listed the cause of death as catastrophic mechanical trauma. The report also noted that the response time had been delayed because the night watchman at the time, a man named Garfield Holt, had reportedly failed to respond to the alarm and was found in the main office in a state of extreme distress, unable to account for his actions or movements during the relevant period. Garfield Holt resigned the following week. He never worked nights again, as far as Tom could determine. Tom worked that elevator for 3 more years. The footsteps continued every week between 1 and 3 a.m., always on the east side, always stopping outside whatever room Tom happened to be in. He never saw anything. But there were 2 nights that were different from the others. The first was a night in February when Tom fell asleep at the desk, something that happened occasionally on the quieter shifts. He woke up to the footsteps, but instead of stopping outside the door, they continued past the door, down the corridor, and up the stairs toward the catwalks. Tom listened to them climb, step by step, to the second level. He listened to them cross the catwalk above his head, all the way to the south wall. And then he heard, very clearly from directly above him, from a catwalk he knew to be empty, the sound of something heavy settling against the railing, the slow creak of metal under weight, as if someone was leaning over to look at him. He didn't sleep on shift again after that. The second different night was his last shift. He'd given his notice, family reasons, nothing to do with the building, he insists, and this was his final overnight. He was doing his last rounds, a little emotional maybe, doing the walkthrough with more attention than usual, trying to absorb details he'd looked at for years without really seeing. He was on the main floor, east side, near the old loading dock section of the building. He stopped. The air was cold there as always, the smell of old copper as always. And on the concrete floor, in a patch of dust near the far wall, he saw footprints. Not his. He was wearing work boots, and these were smaller, the flat, sole-less print of a man's dress shoe, the kind nobody wore in an industrial building. The prints led from the far wall, where there was nothing, no door, no window, just a flat section of concrete wall, and crossed the floor in the direction of the office. The prints stopped about 10 feet from where Tom was standing, as if whatever left them had paused, there in that spot looking at him. Tom told me he stood in that spot for a long moment, not afraid exactly, but respectful, the way you feel in a church or at a grave. He said quietly to the empty floor in front of him, "Rest well, Willard." He left the building, drove home, and slept dreamlessly for the first time in years. He believes, and I am inclined to agree with him, that Willard Creech was not haunting that building. He was simply still there, still doing his rounds, still walking the east side at 2 a.m., same as always, same as he had every night for the 50 years before anyone noticed. Some ghosts aren't trying to scare you. They just don't know where else to be. Open Book Chapter 3, The Recording. She asked me not to use her name or the name of the hospital. I'll call her Claire. She's a hospice nurse with 16 years of experience. She is very clear about this. A superstitious person. She has sat with more dying people than she can count. She has held hands in the dark. She has watched the moment when something leaves a body and what remains behind becomes, instantly and completely, just a body. She has done this more times than most people will do anything in their lives, and she does not find it frightening. She finds it sacred. She submitted her story with a lengthy preamble explaining that she has read the scientific literature on end-of-life experiences, the studies on deathbed visions, on terminal lucidity, on the neurological explanations for the things people see and hear in their final hours. She is familiar with all of it. She is not dismissing any of it. But this, she says, was different. A patient on her ward, she'll call him Mr. Henry, an 81-year-old retired school teacher, had been declining for about 2 weeks. He had no family. He had a neighbor who visited sometimes, a woman in her 60s named Brenda, who brought him crossword puzzles he could no longer complete and sat with him and talked about his garden, which he had evidently been very proud of. In the last few days before his death, Mr. Henry began talking to someone who wasn't there. This is not unusual in hospice care. End-of-life visions, seeing deceased relatives, talking to people invisible to others, are documented, common, and generally considered a comfort. Claire had seen it hundreds of times. She paid attention to it because her patients found it meaningful, but she did not find it strange. What she found strange was the content of his conversations. Most end-of-life visions involve deceased loved ones, spouses, parents, old friends. The language is warm, familiar. Mr. Henry's conversations were different. They were arguments. Not loud. He was too weak for loud. But she would come in to check his vitals and find him agitated, face tight, speaking in a rapid and urgent undertone to the ceiling above his bed. She could rarely make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. He was not welcoming someone. He was arguing with them. Once she heard him say, clearly, "You know I didn't mean for it to happen that way." And once, more clearly still, something that made her stop moving. "I already told you I'm sorry. How many times do I have to?" He stopped when he noticed her at the door. On his last night, Brenda was there. Claire was doing her rounds, checking in every 30 minutes or so. Around midnight, Brenda came to the nurse's station, visibly shaken, and told Claire that Mr. Henry had asked to be recorded. Specifically, he had asked if someone could put a phone or a recorder in the room with him, running, because he wanted his conversation to be documented. He had said, and Brenda quoted this directly, "I want someone to be able to hear it afterward. I want someone to know what really happened." Brenda didn't know what he meant. She had left her phone recording on his bedside table. Mr. Henry died at 2:09 a.m. Peacefully, Claire says, quietly, no distress. Whatever argument he had been engaged in for the previous 2 weeks appeared in the end to have resolved. Claire went into the room at 2:15 a.m. She stopped the recording, 47 minutes on the phone by that point, since Brenda had started it around 1:20 a.m. She put Brenda's phone in her hand and guided her out to the family room. Brenda called her 3 days later. She had listened to the recording. For the first 22 minutes, she said, it was what you'd expect. The ambient sounds of the room, the soft noise of the ventilation, Mr. Henry's breathing slow and irregular, occasionally a quiet sound as he shifted in the bed, peaceful, sad, nothing more. At the 23-minute mark, there was a new sound. Brenda described it as a voice, a second voice, not Mr. Henry's. She said it was like hearing someone speak from the far end of a very long hallway, the tone and rhythm of speech, but the words flattened and distorted as if compressed by distance or interference. She couldn't make out what it said. But Mr. Henry responded, clearly, in his own voice, stronger than it had been in days, with the careful diction of a former schoolteacher. He said, "I know you're angry. I've known for 40 years. But I was 19 years old and I was afraid, and nothing I do now can change what I didn't do then." A pause, the second voice again, still distorted, still incomprehensible. "Mr. Henry, I don't accept that. I don't accept that. That's justice." Another pause, longer. Then Mr. Henry very quietly, all right, I understand." After that, 24 minutes of silence, his breathing slowing. And then at the 46-minute mark, 1 minute before he died, he said, to no one visible, to nothing Brenda or Claire or anyone else had seen in that room, something that Brenda told me she has spent the 3 years since trying to understand. He said, "I'll tell them myself when I get there." Claire never learned what Mr. Henry had done, or what he hadn't done, when he was 19 years old. Brenda knew him only in his final years, as a careful and gentle old man who loved his garden and his crossword puzzles, and who had, apparently, been carrying something for more than 4 decades. Claire told me that in 16 years of hospice nursing, she has never heard anything like that recording. She has heard patients speak to the dying. She has never heard anything speak back. She says she doesn't know what she believes about what happened in that room. But she said something at the end of her submission that I keep coming back to. She said, "Whatever Mr. Henry owed, and I think he really did owe it, I believe he paid it. I believe the argument was finished. I've sat with enough people at the end to recognize what peace looks like, and that man in the last 20 minutes of his life was at peace." She paused. Then she said, "I just wish I knew what he'd done when he was 19. So do I, Claire. So do I." Open Book Chapter 4. What FOLLOWEDME Home. Sophie was in her second year at the University of Edinburgh when she took a job as a night guide on one of the city's ghost tours. She was a history student. She knew her material. She could walk you through the Greyfriars Kirkyard at midnight and describe the anatomy of the Covenanters' prison and the documented history of the supposed poltergeist activity there, all while maintaining the theatrical tone that made tourists feel like they were getting something they'd read about in a book. She was good at it. She enjoyed it. She did not believe in ghosts. The tour she ran 3 nights a week started at Holyrood Palace and wound through the Old Town before finishing in Greyfriars, a 50-minute loop through narrow closes and ancient wynds, past buildings that had stood for 4 and 5 centuries. She'd done it 40 or 50 times. She knew every cobblestone. On the night in question, a Tuesday in October, heavy fog, maybe 12 tourists on the tour, something happened that Sophie initially assumed was a very dedicated tourist playing a prank. She was leading the group through Mary King's Close, the underground street network beneath the Royal Mile, doing her piece about the plague history and the stories of the ghost child who supposedly haunts the site, when she noticed someone at the back of the group who hadn't been there at the start of the tour. He was a man, middle-aged, she thought, though his face was hard to see clearly in the underground lighting. He was dressed oddly, a dark coat that seemed heavier and longer than modern cuts, something that might have been historical costuming or might just have been an unusual jacket. He was listening to her with an attentiveness that made the hair on her arms stand up, though she couldn't have explained why at that moment. Just a feeling. Just the specific discomfort of being watched more carefully than you expect to be watched. She finished her section on the close and moved the group back up to street level. She counted heads, 12 tourists, as billed. The man at the back was not among them. She wrote it off. A passerby who'd wandered in realized he was in a tour and quietly extracted himself. It happened sometimes. 40 minutes later at Greyfriars, she saw him again. He was standing at the edge of the group, at the iron gate to the Covenanters' prison, in the same heavy coat, watching her with the same attentive stillness. This time the lighting was better. Greyfriars was lit by old iron lamp posts, warm amber, and she could see his face more clearly. She described it to me as follows. He looked like a person, but not quite, like a picture of a person, like something that had learned what a person looked like and was doing its best. She looked at him for 3 full seconds. He did not look away, he did not move, he did not blink. She looked back at her group, asked a question to engage them, and when she looked back toward the gate, he was gone. She finished the tour, walked home alone. She lived 10 minutes from Greyfriars on Chambers Street, a walk she'd done hundreds of times. The fog was thick, the streets mostly empty at that hour. She was halfway home when she heard footsteps behind her. Matching hers exactly. The same pace, the same rhythm. She slowed, they slowed. She stopped, they stopped. She started again, they started again. She didn't look back. She walked the rest of the way home at the speed of someone who is not afraid. She let herself in, locked the door, stood in her small entry hall, heart slamming, and listened. The street outside was silent. She told herself it was nothing. She made tea. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and read for a while and went to bed. She woke up at 3 a.m. to find her bedroom door open. She always slept with her door closed. It was a ground floor flat. She was particular about closed doors. The door was open. The hallway beyond it was dark, and from somewhere in the flat, she couldn't pinpoint where, kitchen or sitting room or the small spare room she used as storage. She could hear something that it took her a moment to identify. Breathing. Slow, deliberate, calm. The breathing of someone sitting very still in the dark, waiting. Sophie did the single bravest thing I've ever heard a person do in any of the stories submitted to me. She got out of bed, turned on every light in the flat, and searched every room. Nothing, nobody. Every window locked, every external door locked. Her flatmate was home, she checked, heart in her throat, sleeping, undisturbed in her own room with the door closed. Nothing there that shouldn't be there. But in the sitting room, on the small wooden table by the window where Sophie left her tour bag and her keys every night, something was different. She had a habit of laying her tour route card flat on that table every night, the laminated card with the stops and the talking points. She'd done it for 2 years and it was automatic. The card was standing upright, propped on its edge, standing vertically, as if placed there deliberately. And on the window behind it, the window that looked out onto the street, something had been drawn in the condensation on the glass, from inside, by a finger. 2 marks side by side. Footprints. Small footprints, not adult, not Sophie's, not her flatmates. The footprints of something small and deliberate and patient. Sophie quit the ghost tour the next week. She moved flats 2 months later, telling her landlord it was for financial reasons. The first night in the new flat, she lay awake for a long time listening to the sounds of a new building settling around her, telling herself she had left whatever it was behind. Around 3 a.m., she heard the breathing. She emailed me after that night. Her submission ended with this: "I've been reading about this, about things that attach to people rather than places. I don't know what I picked up in Greyfriars, whether it's something very old that noticed me, or something in the Covenanters' prison that decided it liked the look of me, or something else entirely. All I know is that I've slept with the light on every night for 8 months, and every morning I check the windows, and most mornings there's nothing there." She added, most mornings. Open book chapter 5, The House That Isn't There. Richard is a retired truck driver. He is 63 years old. He drove long haul for 31 years, lower 48, sometimes Canada. And in that time he spent more nights alone on more dark roads than most people drive in a lifetime. He is not a man who frightens easily. He drove through ice storms in Montana and floods in Texas, and a night in the Arizona desert where his headlights picked up something running beside the truck for 6 miles that he has never described to anyone. Until now. But this story isn't about that. This story is about a house in Louisiana. Richard was deadheading south on US 61, late October, about 11 at night, somewhere between St. Francisville and Baton Rouge. He knew this road. He'd driven it dozens of times. The highway cuts through a stretch of old Louisiana countryside, Spanish moss hanging over the lanes like cathedral draping, the flat black of the Mississippi on one side, old plantation country on the other, beautiful in daylight. At night, with no other cars on the road and the fog coming up off the river, it was the kind of road that made you feel like you were driving through a place that time had only loosely agreed to participate in. He saw the house set back from the road, about 100 yards on the left side. He noticed it because it was lit up, every window blazing. In the middle of nothing, in the middle of the night, in the middle of this dark, empty stretch of highway, a 2-story house with every light burning and what appeared to be people moving behind the windows, shadows crossing the glass, the sense of activity of a gathering. It was a large house, old. The silhouette against the night sky was classical Louisiana, wide galleries, exterior columns, the proportions of a home that had been built when homes like this were built by people who had very dark reasons for being able to afford them. Richard slowed down. He wasn't the type to stop. 30 years on the road teaches you to keep moving, always keep moving, but something about the scene struck him as wrong in a way he couldn't immediately articulate. He craned his neck as he rolled past slowly. The shadows in the windows were moving too fast. Not party fast, not conversation fast, but running fast, panicking fast, moving with a franticness that, from this distance in these conditions, looked less like celebration and more like terror. He drove another quarter-mile and pulled over. He called the Louisiana State Police non-emergency line. He gave his location as best he could, no address for a property with no visible mailbox on a stretch of highway with no road markers, and reported what he'd seen. The dispatcher took his information, sounded only mildly interested, and told him a unit would check it out. Richard drove on. He called back the next day to see if anything had come of it. The dispatcher put him through to the officer who'd been dispatched. The officer, he gave his name as SGT. Delacroix told Richard that he had driven the specified section of US 61 twice the night before and had found no house matching that description on the left side of the road. Richard said, "There's definitely a house there, 2-story old, big, lit up like a..." "Sir," the officer said, "I drive that road 3-4 times a week. I know every property on it. There is no house at that location. There's a drainage canal, a cane field, and about 400 feet of river access land that's been fallow since I was in school." Richard thanked him and hung up. He drove US 61 again 3 weeks later, in daylight, deliberately, going slowly, looking. The officer was right. At the location where he'd seen the house, he was certain of it, he'd noted the mileage on his odometer, there was nothing. A drainage canal, bordered by untended scrub and cane. No structure, no foundation, no remnant of a building having ever stood there. He researched it. He spent about a month, on and off, digging through Louisiana property records and historical archives and plantation history websites, looking for a record of a house in that location. He found something. A plantation had stood on that land from approximately 1847 to 1869. It had been burned in 1869, cause undetermined, with the fire described in a local newspaper account as a conflagration of extraordinary speed and completeness. The newspaper account noted that the fire had occurred at night, that the nearest neighbor had reported seeing the windows all ablaze from a mile distant, and that when the fire brigade arrived from St. Francisville, they found the structure completely consumed. No casualties were confirmed, but the account noted that the property had been occupied at the time of the fire. The owner, a man named Delacroix, had been in residence, and that Delacroix, his family, and the people enslaved on the property had all vanished. Not died in the fire. vanished. Their remains were never found. The property was never rebuilt. The land changed hands multiple times over the following decades and eventually passed to the state. Richard read the newspaper account twice. Then he read the owner's name again. Delacroix. The officer who'd been dispatched to check on his call, SGT, Delacroix. Now, Richard is the first to admit that Delacroix and Delacroix are not the same name, close, but not the same, and it could be coincidence. And Louisiana has a long French Creole naming tradition that produces variations on those sounds all across the state. But he looked up SGT, Delacroix. A search of the Louisiana State Police Public Directory produced no officer by that name at the district covering that section of US 61. He called the non-emergency line again. He asked to be put through to SGT, Delacroix. A long pause. The dispatcher said, "Sir, I'm not seeing anyone by that name in our system. Can you give me a badge number?" Richard didn't have one. He said, "He's the officer who responded to my call on October 23rd about a house on US 61. Another pause, longer. The dispatcher said carefully, "Sir, I have your call on record from October 23rd. It was logged and routed for response, but the log shows the call was unassigned. No unit was dispatched." Richard says he sat with his phone in his hand for a long time after that. He's driven US 61 twice more since then. Each time at night, approaching that stretch of highway, he watches the left side of the road. He hasn't seen the house again. But the second time last fall, November, just past midnight, he saw something else. A man standing at the edge of the road, at the right location, just at the shoulder, standing very still facing the highway, watching the trucks pass. Richard didn't stop. He told me he got a look at the man as he passed. He was dressed in the style of the last century. He was not young. His face, in the sweep of the headlights, wore an expression that Richard described as the way a man looks when he's been standing in the same spot for a very long time, waiting for something that may not be coming. Richard still drives. Not long haul anymore, local work, mostly days. He avoids US 61 after dark. He ended his submission with a question that I have thought about every day since he sent it. He wrote, "If the house burned in 1869 and nobody knows what happened to the people inside it, why is it still lit up? What are they doing in there? And why does it look from the road like they're trying to get out?" Open Book Chapter 6, The Mirror Room. Jade is 31. She works in property management. She is, she says, the least spiritual person she knows, and she submits this story not to prove anything supernatural but because it happened and she wants it on record somewhere. In 2019, she spent a weekend at a rented country house in the Cotswolds, one of those large old properties available on holiday rental sites. Beautiful grounds, 8 bedrooms, the kind of place you book with a large group for a birthday or a hen do. Jade was there with 9 friends for a 30th birthday weekend. The house was lovely, old 17th century core with Victorian additions, and well maintained for a rental, though with the particular atmosphere of old English country houses that have been furnished with antiques and oil portraits and Persian rugs, and always feel slightly like a very upscale version of a place that hasn't been truly alive in a long time. The strange room was on the 2nd floor. It was listed in the property guide as a dressing room connected to the largest guest bedroom. It was a small room, perfectly square, with no windows. The walls were paneled in dark wood from floor to ceiling, and on each of the 4 walls, all 4, hung a large, heavily framed mirror. 4 mirrors facing each other, each one reflecting the other 3, on and on into infinity. Jade's friend Amy was given the large bedroom with the attached dressing room. Amy found the room immediately unsettling and asked Jade if she'd mind swapping. Jade said fine. She wasn't bothered by mirrors and moved her bag in. She didn't use the dressing room that first night. She left it closed and slept fine. The second day, Saturday, she went in to hang up a dress she'd steamed. She stood in the room for about a minute, adjusting the dress on its hanger, and became aware that the mirrors felt wrong in a way she couldn't initially name. Then she named it. There were 4 mirrors. 2 of them were reflecting correctly. When she raised her left hand, the reflection raised its right. Normal. But in the other 2 mirrors, the ones on the north wall and the east wall, something was fractionally off. The reflection was moving a fraction of a second late, not like a video buffering, slower than that, deliberate. She tested it. She raised and lowered her hand quickly, watching all 4 mirrors. Too perfect, too late. She stood very still. The reflections in all 4 mirrors stilled with her. Except that in the north mirror, after she stopped moving, the reflection took one more small step. 1 step toward her. Jade left the room, closed the door, and told herself she was imagining it. Differing glass ages causing different refractive properties. Some trick of the wall angles. A rational explanation that she could not fully articulate, but that surely existed. She did not go back into the dressing room that night. At 2 a.m., she woke to the sound of her bedroom door. The door connecting the bedroom to the dressing room, opening. Very slowly, an inch at a time, the old hinges giving a long, resonant creak. Jade sat up in bed and watched the door open. Her bedside lamp was on. She'd fallen asleep reading. She could see clearly. When the door was fully open, the darkness of the dressing room beyond it was absolute. No ambient light. 4 mirrors in a windowless room, and still, somehow, no reflection of her lamp's light reaching back through the open door. As if something was absorbing it. She watched the open door for 30 seconds. Nothing moved. Then she heard from inside the dark room the sound of a single footstep. Jade turned her lamp up as high as it went, called Amy on her mobile. Amy was in the room directly across the hall and refused to be alone. Both women sat in Jade's bed with the lamp on and the dressing room door closed. Jade had crossed the room at speed and pulled it shut the moment she heard the footstep, until morning. In the morning, Jade opened the dressing room door. The 4 mirrors were intact. The room was fine, normal. Except that in each of the 4 mirrors, something had changed. Each mirror now showed the room from a slightly different angle than its physical position allowed, as if each mirror had been turned a few degrees, though none of them had been touched. Each mirror now showed not the center of the room, not Jade standing in the doorway, but a different corner of the room. The 4 corners, 1 per mirror, each corner dark in the reflection, darker than the actual lit room warranted. And in one of the corners, she could not tell which mirror it was, because the angle of reflection made it impossible to match to a physical corner. In one of the corners of the room, something was standing. She could see it in the reflection. She could not see it in the room itself. It was the shape of a person, standing in a corner, face toward the wall. Like a child in a timeout, or like something hiding. Or like something that has learned that if it faces the wall, you cannot see its face. Jade left the property that morning with her overnight bag, paid for the full weekend, and submitted a review of the rental property that mentioned only the beauty of the grounds, the well-equipped kitchen, and the comfortable beds. She did not mention the dressing room. She checked afterward if the property was still listed. It was. She checked the reviews. 3 other reviewers across different years mentioned the unusual mirror room on the 2nd floor. 2 said they found it cozy and characterful. 1, a single sentence at the bottom of an otherwise enthusiastic 5-star review said simply, "Would recommend but avoid the mirrors." Open Book Chapter 7, What Lily Knew. This is the story that kept me up. Karen and her husband David moved into a 1940s colonial in a quiet Columbus suburb in the spring of 2021. Their daughter Lily was 4 years old. The house had a finished basement, carpeted, clean, set up as a playroom with a small television, and a low bookshelf full of toys. Lily loved the basement. She had always been an imaginative child, spent hours in elaborate solo play, narrating stories to herself in a running undertone, creating what child psychologists call paracosms, entire private worlds with their own rules and populations. Corinne and David were used to hearing their daughter talk to herself. What they weren't used to was hearing their daughter wait for a response. It started about 3 weeks after they moved in. Corinne was in the kitchen, Lily was in the basement playing, and Corinne became aware that Lily's usual running narration had changed. Instead of the continuous flow of one person playing alone, there were pauses, spaces, the rhythm of a conversation. Corinne went to the top of the basement stairs and listened. Lily was asking questions, simple child questions. What's your name? And why are you sad? And where do you live? And then waiting, listening to something Corinne couldn't hear, then responding as if the answer had been satisfactory. Corinne called down, "Lily, who are you talking to?" Lily called back immediately and cheerfully, "The boy." Corinne went down. The basement was empty except for Lily, seated on the floor with her toys. Corinne said, "What boy?" Lily said, "The one by the shelf. He went away when you came." Corinne looked at the bookshelf, toys on the shelves, nothing else. She looked at her daughter's calm, interested face and made the parental decision to treat this as imaginary play. She said, "Okay, sweetheart, tell your friend he can stay for dinner if he wants." Lily said seriously, "He says he can't eat. He says he's too cold." The conversations continued over the following weeks. Corinne and David did what you do with a bright 4-year-old and a strong imagination. They monitored without interfering, watching for any sign of distress or fear. There was none. Lily seemed to genuinely enjoy her basement friend. She called him the boy always, never giving him a name. When asked his name, she would report what she'd apparently been told, and the name was different each time. Carl, then Thomas. Then just, "He says I can call him whatever I want." A month in, Lily said something that made Corinne sit down. She came upstairs from the basement and told her mother that the boy wanted to show her something. He had told her where to find it. He had told her to tell her mom. He had told Lily to tell Corinne to look under the carpet in the northwest corner. Corinne asked Lily how the boy knew about the carpet. Lily said, "He's always been here. He says he was here before us. He says before us there was another family, and before that another family, and he's been here the whole time." David lifted the carpet in the northwest corner of the basement that evening. Under the carpet was a hatch, a wooden hatch cut into the concrete subfloor that hadn't been mentioned in the property inspection, that no one had told them about. Under the hatch, a small crawl space, maybe 3 feet deep. Old earthen floor, stone walls on the sides, the underside of the concrete above. Probably a cold storage cellar from the house's original construction. And in the crawl space, a tin box rusted shut about the size of a shoebox. Inside the tin box, after David worked it open with a screwdriver, were a number of items, each wrapped in oilcloth that had preserved them better than they had any right to be preserved. A small leather journal, a collection of photographs, black and white, a child's shoe, one shoe, a small folded piece of newspaper, the date torn off but the headlines visible, Columbus Dispatch, sometime in what appeared to be the late 1940s or early 1950s. The journal was written in a careful, looping child's handwriting. The first page read, "My name is Carl Edward Mosler, and I am 9 years old and I live at this house." The photographs were family portraits, a mother, a father, a boy of about 9 with serious eyes and neatly combed hair. The boy matched a face in the photos to nothing external. They had no way to verify it was Carl. But it was a boy, and the boy in the photographs was looking at the camera with an expression that Corinne described to me as not sad exactly, more like patient, like someone who has been waiting for someone to find him for a very long time. The Columbus Dispatch clipping, they could read only part of it, the rest torn away, contained a small news item about a local family. The Mosler family of address redacted, but Karen confirmed it was their address. The item reported that Carl Edward Mosler, age 9, had gone missing in the autumn of that year. He was described as a quiet, studious boy who had last been seen playing in the yard. The item was 3 paragraphs. The last paragraph, which was the edge of the torn piece and thus only partially readable, contained a phrase that Karen photographed and sent to me. It read, "Authorities have not ruled out the possibility that the child is still." The rest was gone. Karen called the Columbus City Historical Records Office. Carl Edward Mosler did exist. There was a school enrollment record, a census record from 1950. There was no death record, no record of his body ever being found. The case was apparently opened, never closed, and eventually filed into history. Karen and David have lived in the house for 3 years now. They placed the tin box and its contents with the Columbus Police Department, who reopened the missing persons case. Nothing has been resolved. Lily is 7 now. She stopped talking to the boy about 6 months after the box was found, shortly after Karen told her, gently, in child-appropriate terms, that the boy in the basement had been real once, and that they had told people about him so he would be remembered. Lily listened carefully and then said, "He's glad. He says he can go now." Karen asked, "Go where?" Lily considered this. Then she said, with the confident certainty of a 7-year-old reporting a fact, "He says somewhere warmer." She has not spoken to him since. The basement is quiet. Karen says it feels different down there now. Not empty houses don't go empty overnight, but lighter somehow, like a held breath finally released. She says sometimes, when she's down there, she still feels the specific sensation of being watched, but it doesn't feel unkind. It feels, she says, like the way it feels when someone is watching you leave, just to see you go safely. Like goodbye. I think about Carl Mosler a lot. I think about the 9 years he spent in that house before he went missing, and the 7 decades he spent in the basement after, and the 4-year-old girl who was the first person in all that time willing to sit down and actually listen to him. I hope he's somewhere warmer. Open Book Chapter 8, Last Call. Noah was 29 when his brother died. His brother's name was Isaac. He was 32. He died of a heart attack, sudden, without warning, the kind of thing that shouldn't happen to a 32-year-old former college athlete who had never been sick a day in his adult life. He died on a Wednesday afternoon in January, in the parking lot of a supermarket in Phoenix, and by the time the paramedics arrived, he was already gone. Noah and Isaac had been close, not in the performative way of people who become close only after something is lost, but genuinely, actively close. They talked on the phone 3 or 4 times a week. They watched football together every Sunday they were in the same city. They had the shorthand of shared childhood, the easy language of brothers who had grown up together, and then had the luck of actually liking each other as adults. Noah's grief was uncomplicated by anything except its intensity. He missed his brother with the blunt, physical constancy of a wound that doesn't close. He went to therapy. He got through the first year. He learned the geography of the absence. 14 months after Isaac's death, his phone rang at 2:47 a.m. He was asleep. He reached for his phone with the automatic gesture of a man who has learned to take calls from numbers he doesn't recognize because you never know. You never know. The screen showed an unknown number, a Phoenix area code, but not one in his contacts. He answered. Static, the long, oceanic hiss of a bad connection, and beneath the static, faint and formless, something that might have been a voice. Noah sat up. He said, "Hello." The static deepened, and then through it, clearly enough that Noah is absolutely certain, because he lay awake for the rest of that night replaying it, a voice said his name. His name, his specific name, not hello or is anyone there, his name. It was Isaac's voice. Noah said, "Isaac." Static, long static. And then, as if from an enormous distance, as if the signal was fighting something immense just to reach him, "I'm okay." That's all. 2 words and then static and then silence, and then the call disconnected. Noah called the number back immediately. A recorded message. "The number you have dialed is not in service." He found the number in his call log. He Googled it. He ran it through every reverse lookup service he could find. No result. Not a disconnected number. Not even a number that had ever been assigned. He told his therapist. His therapist said what therapists say: grief can manifest in auditory and visual hallucinations. The sleeping brain frequently produces experiences of the deceased that feel absolutely real. The content of the experience, "I'm okay," was exactly the message his grieving mind most needed to receive. She was kind and careful and probably not wrong. But Noah had screenshots of the call, the number, the duration, 41 seconds the time. He also had his mother. When he told her a week later, she went very quiet. Then she said, "What day was that? What date?" Noah checked his phone, January 17th. His mother was quiet for a very long time. January 17th was Isaac's birthday. He would have been 34. She said, "He always called you at night." And Noah, barely able to speak, said, "Yeah, he always called late. I used to get on him about it." A long silence. Then his mother said, voice steady with the determined steadiness of a woman holding something very large very carefully, "I think he just wanted you to know." Noah is 32 now, the same age Isaac was when he died. He told me he thinks about that every day. He's kept the screenshot of the call log. He's looked at it hundreds of times. He says he doesn't know what he believes. He's not religious. He's not a person who has ever given much thought to what happens after, but he knows what he heard. He knows it was Isaac's voice. He knows what it said. And he says that on every January 17th since, he leaves his phone charged and his ringer on, and he sleeps with it on the pillow beside him. Not because he expects it to ring. He says he just wants Isaac to know, if knowing is something Isaac can still do, that he's there. That the line is open. That whenever Isaac wants to call, Noah will answer. Open Book Chapter 9, The Wrong Floor. May lived in a high-rise apartment in Chicago's West Loop for 3 years. The building was modern, built in the early 2000s, glass and steel. The kind of building with a doorman and a gym and a rooftop terrace and no particular history worth mentioning. It was 22 floors. She lived on the 14th. The elevator in her building was the kind with a floor directory panel and a dim amber interior light that she had always found slightly oppressive on late-night rides up from the lobby. But it was a normal elevator. She rode it twice a day, minimum, for 3 years. She knew it the way you know any piece of your daily infrastructure, not consciously, just as a setting, a background. The first time it happened, she thought it was a malfunction. She got in the elevator on a Thursday night, pressed 14, and the elevator went up. This was normal. It stopped, and the doors opened, and she stepped out and stopped. The hallway was wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not impossibly wrong, but wrong in the way of a familiar face with something subtly different about it. The carpet, the same pattern, the same color, had a different wear pattern than her floor's carpet, worn in different places. The light fixture at the far end of the hall was a slightly different style. The apartment doors were the same doors, the same numbering, but the small framed prints between the doors that management had installed throughout the building, little botanical prints, uniform across all floors, were in different positions than on the 14th floor. May looked at the elevator panel. The display read 14. She stepped back into the elevator, pressed the door close button, and pressed 14 again. The elevator didn't move. The display still read 14. She rode up to 15, got off, walked down the fire stairs to 14, and arrived on her floor, which was identifiably correct. She mentioned it to the building manager the next day. He said the elevator's floor display was occasionally glitchy and he'd have it looked at. He seemed unbothered. The second time happened a month later. Same elevator, same time of night, same ride up from the lobby. This time when the doors opened, the hallway was more wrong. The carpet was a different color entirely, beige instead of charcoal. The doors were the same. The numbering was the same, but the light level was different, dimmer, with an orange tint that felt less like a light bulb and more like daylight filtered through heavy curtains. And the hallway smelled different. Not bad, just old. Like a place that hadn't had windows open in a very long time. May held the door open button and looked down the hallway. At the far end, where her floor had a fire door, this floor had what appeared to be a window. A large window, uncurtained, looking out into dark. She was on the 14th floor of a 22-story building. There was no exterior window at the end of the 14th floor corridor. And standing at that window, silhouetted against the dark outside, was a man. He was looking out. He had his hands flat against the glass, his forehead bowed forward as if resting against it, his back to the hallway, to the elevator, to May. She released the door open button. The elevator doors closed. She pressed 15. She walked down the stairs. She researched the building. She found what she was looking for without much difficulty, because Chicago building records are public, and the history of a West Loop high-rise in a gentrifying neighborhood is exactly the kind of thing that shows up in architecture blogs and neighborhood history websites. The building had been constructed in 2002. Before it, a warehouse from the 1950s. Before the warehouse, a 6-story residential hotel from the 1920s. The hotel had been the site, in 1948, of a fire on the 4th floor that had killed 7 residents before being brought under control. The cause of the fire was listed as an electrical fault in a floor hallway. The 4th floor of the hotel, by the architectural drawings available online, corresponded, given the difference in floor heights between a 1920s hotel and a 2000s high-rise, to approximately the 14th floor of the current building. The third time it happened, May didn't get out of the elevator. She pressed 14, the elevator ascended, the doors opened. Wrong hallway, wrong carpet, wrong light, the smell of old air. She looked down the corridor. The man was still at the window, still pressed against the glass, still looking out at something she couldn't see. But this time, as the elevator doors began to slide closed slowly on their timer, the man turned his head. Just his head. The rest of his body still pressed to the glass, forehead still bowed. Just his head, rotating slowly to look back down the hallway toward the elevator. Toward May. She couldn't see his face in that light in that distance, but he was looking at her. She is certain of it. The doors closed. She moved out of the building 4 months later, citing noise from neighboring construction. Her new apartment is on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building built in 1985. It has no elevator. She says she still sometimes, in other buildings, in other elevators, holds her breath when the doors open, just for a half second, just long enough to check that the carpet is the right color, the light is the right temperature, the corridor is the floor she pressed. It always is, so far. She ended her submission with a question that I've been sitting with for weeks. She asked, was it a residual haunting, the hotel reasserting itself, the old floor bleeding through the new one? Or was it something else? Was it the man at the window who was doing it? Was he pulling the wrong floor through somehow, keeping his hotel on the 14th of every building that will ever be built on that land, just so he can stand at that window forever and look at whatever it is he's looking at? She said, and what is he looking at? That's the thing that bothers me most. In 1948, after the fire, looking out of the window of that burning hotel, what would you see? What would you be looking for? I think he was looking for a way out. I think he's still looking. Open Book Chapter 10, The New Normal. Maggie has lived in her current house for 4 years. She is 38, single, works remotely in medical billing. She bought the house, a 3-bedroom adobe near the Rio Grande, because it was within her budget, and she had fallen in love with the light in the kitchen and the fig tree in the backyard, and the view of the Sandia Mountains from the bedroom window. She is a practical woman. She did not buy this house for its history, and when the realtor mentioned briefly that the previous owner had passed on, she nodded and didn't ask for details. She should have asked for details. The first year, nothing. The second year, small things, objects moved, lights flickering, the kind of incidents you accumulate slowly and don't worry about because each one, individually, is explainable. The third year, it escalated. It started with the smell. A specific smell appearing in the hallway near the back bedroom at night, the smell of tobacco smoke, cold and stale, like a pipe left sitting, like a room that has held smoke for decades and never fully let it go. There was no smoker in Maggie's life. She'd never smoked. The smell had no source. Then the sounds. She has described them carefully. Methodically, the way a woman who works with data approaches an anomaly. At irregular intervals, not every night, maybe 3 nights a week, sometimes skipping 2 weeks entirely, she hears a slow, measured sound from the back bedroom. She describes it as the sound of a rocking chair on a hardwood floor, except there's no rocking chair, except the floor in that room is tile. She recorded it. She sent me the recording. I'm not going to describe what's on it in detail except to say that whatever it is rhythmic and patient and has been going on, by Maggie's account, for over a year. Then the cold spot appeared. In the hallway directly outside the back bedroom door, a patch of air, roughly 3 feet in diameter, consistently 15 to 20 degrees colder than the surrounding hallway. Not seasonal, not a draft. It is there in August when Albuquerque is 100 degrees. It is there in January. It is always there. Her home thermometer, held in the spot, reads temperatures that have no physical explanation given the building's construction and the ambient climate. Maggie has a cat, a large orange tabby named Biscuit. Biscuit refuses to go past the cold spot, has refused for 2 years. He will walk up to it, sniff it, and walk firmly in the opposite direction. He sleeps on a chair in the kitchen. He has not been in the back third of the house in 2 years. His behavior in the rest of the house is normal. The marks started 8 months ago. The first one appeared on the wall beside the back bedroom door. A single horizontal line at approximately shoulder height, about 4 inches long, scored into the paint. Not a scratch. Deliberately drawn with even pressure, as if someone had pressed a fingernail to the wall and pulled it slowly across. Maggie had the wall repainted. A month later, 2 more marks, same height, same deliberate pressure, parallel. Then 3 months ago, a cluster of them. 6 marks side by side at that same shoulder height on the wall beside the door, and below them at about knee height 4 more. And beside those, in a pattern that Maggie photographed and sent to me, and that I have looked at many times, a pattern that, taken as a whole, looks like a figure. Schematic, rough, the way a child draws a person with simple lines and a circle, but unmistakably human in proportion. A figure of a person. Beside the door. At the height of a person. Maggie researched the previous owner. She found him without difficulty, a man named Gerald Tate, who had lived in the house for 19 years before dying there at the age of 77. He died alone. His body was found 3 days later by a neighbor who had noticed the mail accumulating. He had been a smoker, a pipe specifically. His obituary, which Maggie found in a local paper's online archive, mentioned his garden, his cat, he had kept cats, and his habit of spending his evenings in the back bedroom, which he used as a sitting room, in an armchair he'd owned for 40 years. Not a rocking chair. But the obituary also mentioned his children, a son in Denver, a daughter in Seattle, neither of whom had been close to their father in his final years. And it mentioned, in its brief closing paragraph, a detail that Maggie read 3 times before closing her laptop and sitting in her kitchen for a long time. It said that Gerald Tate had been, in his working years, a carpenter. Maggie called the son in Denver. He was guarded but eventually willing to talk. He confirmed the details, the pipe, the back bedroom, the armchair. He also confirmed that his father, in the years alone in that house, had been a man of consistent and deliberate habit. He had kept his days organized. He had been, the son said, not lonely exactly, but careful. The way people get when they've been alone a long time. Very deliberate about everything. She asked about the marks. There was a long pause. The son said, "Marks on the wall." She described them. Another pause. He said he used to do that. He'd mark things on walls if he wanted to remember them. A measurement or a height or something he needed to come back to. It was a carpenter thing. We used to get on him about it. Maggie has not left the house. She told me when I spoke with her last week that she is not afraid of Gerald Tate. She is not afraid of the cold spot or the marks or the sound of the chair. She says she has come, over 4 years and 3 years of this escalating presence, to think of Gerald the way you think of a very old tenant who was there before you and has certain habits and certain routes through the house and a certain investment in the space. She says she leaves the back bedroom door open. She says she talks to the cold spot sometimes, just briefly, the way you'd say good morning to someone you pass in a hallway. She says she doesn't know if it helps, but it seems like the polite thing to do. She said he was alone for a long time. He died alone. His kids didn't come until after. I think maybe he just doesn't want to go back to that, to the alone part. I think maybe he just wants to be in the house. She looked me right in the camera on our video call. She is a woman with a steady, open face and the particular calm of someone who has decided something. She said, "So I'm letting him." 8 months later, she texted me. She said she'd woken up the previous night to the sound of the chair. She'd lain there listening to it as she often does. But that night, for the first time, it stopped after a few minutes. Not the way it usually stops, the slow, uncertain trailing off, but decisively, as if someone had stood up. And then from the hallway, one set of footsteps, slow, measured, down the hall past the cold spot, past her door, all the way to the front of the house. She lay perfectly still. The front door opened and closed. She got up and checked. The front door was locked from the inside, as it always was. The house was empty except for her and Biscuit. The cold spot in the hallway was gone. She stood in the place where it had been for a long moment, feeling the normal warm air of a normal Albuquerque night. And she felt, she said this carefully, she is a careful woman, she felt grief. Not fear, not relief, grief. The small, clean grief of something that has finished. She wrote to me, "I think he left. I think he finally left. I don't know where he went. I hope it was somewhere good. I hope his armchair is there and the pipes smell and the evenings the way he liked them." She added one more line, the last line of her submission, the last words of tonight's compilation. She wrote, "Last night I checked the walls. He left one more mark, on the wall beside the front door at shoulder height. One clean line, the length of a goodbye. 10 stories, 10 real people who opened their computers or their phones in the quiet of some ordinary night and wrote down the thing that happened to them that they have never been able to explain. I don't ask you to believe all of them. I don't ask you to believe any of them. That's not the point. The point is that these people experienced something that changed the texture of their ordinary lives, that moved through their houses and their nights and their grief, and they chose to tell someone. I'm glad they told me. I'm glad I got to tell you. If something has happened to you, something you've never told anyone, something that keeps finding you at 3 a.m., you know where to send it. I'll be here. Sleep well. If you can.